The morning sun cast long shadows across the broken walls of New Haven Colony. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck, looking out at the alien ships that surrounded their home. 3 months ago, the Vex-High had arrived without warning. 3 months of bombardment. 3 months of watching his people slowly die. Jake pressed his hand against the reinforced glass. Beyond the failing energy shields, he could see the massive reptilian warships hovering like vultures. Their dark hulls gleamed in the sunlight, weapons pointed down at the colony. The aliens were patient. They did not need to attack directly. They could simply wait for the humans to starve. "Commander, we need to talk." Lieutenant Lisa Carter entered the observation room. Her uniform was dirty and torn. Dark circles ringed her eyes. Like everyone else in the colony, she had not slept well in weeks. Jake turned from the window. "What is it, Lisa?" "Food supplies. We have maybe 4 days left if we cut rations again." Lisa held a data pad in her shaking hands. "The hydroponics bay took another hit yesterday. Half the growing chambers are destroyed." Jake closed his eyes. 8,000 people lived in New Haven Colony. Families with children, workers who had come here to build a new life. Old people who had saved for years to retire on this peaceful world. Now they were all trapped in what had become their tomb. "What about the water recyclers?" Jake asked. "Still working, but barely. Pete Davis says the main processor is running on backup power. If it fails, we have maybe 2 weeks of water left." Lisa's voice was flat. She had delivered too much bad news in recent weeks. Through the speakers, they could hear the sound of children crying. Food portions had been cut so many times that even the youngest colonists were hungry. The adults tried to hide their own pain, but Jake could see it in their faces. Parents giving their food to their children. Workers collapsing from exhaustion. Everyone slowly wasting away. "Sir, there's more." Lisa looked at her datapad again. "Dr. Amy Roberts says we lost 3 more people last night. The medicine ran out 2 weeks ago. People are dying from things we could easily treat if we had supplies." Jake walked to his desk and sat down heavily. The command center around them buzzed with quiet activity. His remaining officers worked at their stations trying to maintain some hope of defense. But everyone knew the truth. They were beaten. The door opened again. Dr. Amy Roberts walked in, still wearing her medical scrubs. Blood stained the front of her coat. Her face was pale and drawn. "Jake, I need to talk to you." Amy's voice was tired. "We lost Mrs. Johnson this morning. Infection. Her daughter, little Sue, keeps asking when Mommy is coming home." Jake felt something break inside his chest. He had known the Johnson family personally, good people who had worked hard to make New Haven a better place. Now a 7-year-old girl was an orphan because they had no medicine. "How many more?" Jake asked quietly. "At least a dozen are in critical condition. Without proper medicine, they won't last the week." Amy sat down across from Jake's desk. "And the children. They're so hungry, Jake. Some of the babies are already showing signs of malnutrition." Lisa stepped forward. "What about the emergency medical supplies? The ones locked in the secure storage?" Amy shook her head. "Gone. We used the last of them 3 days ago. There's nothing left." The room fell silent except for the distant hum of the failing power generators. Jake looked at his 2 officers. These were good people who had served with honor. They deserved better than this slow death. "Commander." The voice came from the communication station across the room. Specialist Tony Clark was hunched over his equipment, pressing headphones against his ears. "I'm picking up something on the emergency channels." Jake stood up quickly. "What kind of something?" "It's weak, sir. Very weak. But it sounds like a distress signal from the outer system." Tony adjusted his controls. "Wait, there's more. Multiple signals. They're very faint." For a moment, Jake felt a spark of hope. Maybe a rescue fleet had finally arrived. Maybe Earth had sent help. But the hope died quickly. Even if ships were coming, they would be too late. The colony would be dead before any rescue could arrive. Dr. Roberts stood up. "I need to get back to the medical bay. More people will need help today." She paused at the door. "Jake, whatever you decide to do, decide quickly. We don't have much time left." After Amy left, Jake walked back to the window. The alien ships still hung in the sky like dark clouds. He could see movement on their hulls, weapons tracking back and forth, waiting. Lisa, gather the senior staff. We need to make a decision. Jake's voice was heavy with the weight of command. What kind of decision, sir? Jake looked at his tactical officer. Lisa Carter had served with him for 5 years. She was smart, brave, and loyal. She deserved the truth. We're going to die here, Lisa. All of us. The question is how. Jake turned, back to the window. We can keep fighting until the last person starves, or we can try to negotiate, maybe save some lives. Lisa was quiet for a long moment. The aliens don't usually take prisoners. No, they don't. But maybe if we surrender, they'll let some of the children live. Maybe the families. Jake knew he was grasping at thin hope, but it was all they had left. The intercom crackled to life. All senior staff to the command center, priority meeting. Over the next hour, Jake's remaining officers gathered in the command room. Pete Davis, the chief engineer, looked exhausted. His hands were black with grease from working on the failing power systems. Helen Brooks, the colony coordinator, had been trying to keep civilian morale up, but even she looked defeated. We need to face reality, Jake told them. We're out of options. Food, medicine, power. Everything is failing. We have maybe a week before people start dying in large numbers. Carl Bennett, a former soldier who now worked colony security, slammed his fist on the table. We can't give up. These lizards want to kill us all anyway. At least if we fight, we go down with honor. What honor is there in watching children starve? Helen's voice was sharp. I've got families asking me when help is coming. What do I tell them? You tell them we're not giving up, Carl shot back. You tell them we're human beings, not cattle for slaughter. Pete looked up from his hands. The power grid will fail completely in 2 days. Maybe 3 if we shut down non-essential systems. But that means no life support in the outer sections. People will have to move to the center of the colony. How many can the center hold? Jake asked. Maybe half. 3,000 people if we pack them in tight. Pete's voice was flat. The other 5,000 will have to find somewhere else to go. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. They would have to choose who lived and who died. Families would be separated. Some people would be left to die in the cold outer sections while others crowded into the remaining heated areas. Jake looked around the table at his officers. These people had trusted him to keep them safe. He had failed them all. Sir, Lisa said quietly, there is one other option. Everyone looked at her. We surrender. We contact the aliens and offer to give up. Maybe they'll accept terms that save some lives. Carl started to object, but Jake held up his hand. What kind of terms? I don't know, Lisa admitted. But it's better than watching everyone die slowly. Jake closed his eyes and thought about little Sue Johnson, asking when her mother was coming home. He thought about the babies crying from hunger, the old people dying from simple infections, the families huddled together in the cold. All right, he said finally. Prepare a surrender message. We'll contact the aliens tomorrow morning. The room erupted in argument. Carl and several others stood up, shouting about honor and fighting to the death. Helen and Pete supported the surrender. Lisa tried to maintain order. Jake walked back to the window and looked up at the alien ships. Tomorrow he would call them and offer to give up. He would beg them to spare his people. It was the hardest decision he had ever made. But as he watched the dark ships hovering over his dying colony, Jake Morrison knew it was their only hope. The surrender message went out at dawn. Commander Jake Morrison stood in the communications room watching Tony Clark send the signal to the alien fleet. The words felt like poison in his mouth as he spoke them into the microphone. This is Commander Morrison of New Haven Colony. We request terms for surrender. Our people are dying. We cannot continue to fight. Please respond. The message repeated every hour for 6 hours. Then the aliens answered. The voice that came through the speakers was harsh and cold. It spoke English with a thick accent that made the words sound like growls. Human Commander, I am Warcast Thekmore of the Vex High Empire. You wish to surrender? Jake keyed the microphone with shaking hands. Yes, we have civilians here, women and children. We want to negotiate terms that will save lives. A sound came through the speakers that might have been laughter. Terms, you are defeated. You have no position to negotiate. But I will tell you what will happen. Jake waited. Around him, his officers listened in tense silence. All adult males will be executed as examples to other human colonies. All technology will be destroyed. The remaining females and young will serve the Empire as slaves. These are not terms, this is what will happen. The communication ended with a harsh click. Jake stared at the silent radio for a long moment. Then he turned to his officers. You heard that? Jake said quietly. Those are their terms. Lieutenant Lisa Carter spoke first. We can't accept that. It's not surrender, it's genocide. What choice do we have? Helen Brooks had entered the room during the transmission. Her face was pale. At least some people would live. The children would live. As slaves, Carl Bennett said from the doorway. You want to condemn kids to a lifetime of slavery? Better than death? Helen shot back. At least they'd be alive. Carl stepped into the room. Behind him were a dozen other colonists, workers, security guards, even some civilians. All of them looked angry. We won't surrender to those terms, Carl announced. If we're going to die, we die fighting. We don't hand our children over to aliens. And what happens when the food runs out? Helen demanded. What happens when the power fails? You want to watch babies starve to death because of your pride? It's not about pride, Carl replied. It's about being human. Humans don't give up. We fight. Jake watched the argument develop. His people were tearing themselves apart. Half wanted to fight to the death. Half wanted to accept any terms that might save some lives. Both sides were desperate and scared. Enough, Jake said loudly. The room fell quiet. We have 24 hours to decide. The aliens want an answer by tomorrow dawn. That night, Jake walked through the colony. The hallways were dimmer than usual as Pete Davis worked to save power. Families huddled together in small groups. Children asked questions their parents couldn't answer. In the medical bay, Dr. Amy Roberts worked over a sick child. The little boy was thin and pale. His mother sat beside the bed holding his hand. Amy looked up when Jake entered. How is he? Jake asked quietly. Dying, Amy said simply. Infection. His body is too weak to fight it. Without antibiotics, he won't last the night. Jake looked at the child. He couldn't be more than 5 years old. What's his name? Bobby Martinez. His father was killed in the first week of the siege. His mother works in the kitchens. Amy checked the boy's temperature. She gave him her food rations for the past month. Now she's sick too. Jake felt anger burn in his chest. This child should be playing with friends, going to school, growing up safe and happy. Instead, he was dying because aliens wanted to prove their superiority. Doctor, the boy's mother whispered. Is Bobby going to be okay? Amy looked at Jake, then back at the woman. We're doing everything we can. It was a lie, and everyone in the room knew it, but sometimes lies were all they had left. Jake continued his walk through the colony. In the residential section, he found families saying goodbye to each other. Parents hugged their children. Couples held each other close. Everyone understood that tomorrow might be their last day. He stopped at the school section. Through a window, he saw Nancy Phillips sitting with a group of children. She was reading them a story about brave heroes in distant worlds. The children listened with wide eyes, temporarily forgetting their hunger and fear. Nancy saw Jake watching and came outside. Commander, what's going to happen to us? Jake looked at the teacher. She was young, maybe 25. She had come to New Haven to start a new school program. Now she was asking him if she would live to see another week. I don't know, Nancy. We're trying to find the best solution. The children keep asking when they can go outside and play again, when their parents will stop looking so worried. Nancy's voice was soft. What do I tell them? Jake had no answer. He patted Nancy's shoulder and continued walking. In the main common area, he found a large group of colonists gathered around Carl Bennett. The former soldier stood on a chair, addressing the crowd. "We are not going to hand our children over to monsters," Carl declared. "We are not going to watch our families enslaved. If we're going to die, we die as free humans." Several people cheered. Others looked uncertain. An older man raised his hand. "Carl, my granddaughter is only 3 years old. If surrender means she lives even as a slave, isn't that better than death, is it?" Carl asked. "Would you want to live your whole life as a slave? Would you want her to?" "At least she'd have a chance," the old man replied. "Dead is dead. Slaves can sometimes become free." A woman in the crowd spoke up. "My husband was taken in the first attack. I don't know if he's alive or dead. But I have 2 young sons. I'll do anything to keep them alive." The crowd murmured agreement and disagreement. Jake could see the colony splitting into 2 camps. Those with children generally wanted to surrender. Those without wanted to fight. Jake climbed onto a nearby table. The crowd turned to look at him. "Everyone listen. I know this is hard. I know we're all scared. But we need to make this decision together. Whatever we choose as one. Community." "What do you think we should do, Commander?" someone called out. Jake looked over the faces in the crowd. These people trusted him. They were looking to him for leadership in the darkest moment of their lives. "I think," Jake said slowly, "that we need to consider what it means to be human, what we're willing to sacrifice to survive, and what we're willing to die for." The crowd was silent. "Go home to your families tonight. Hold them close. Talk to them. Tomorrow morning we'll vote. Whatever the majority decides, that's what we'll do." As the crowd dispersed, Jake noticed movement outside the windows. HFY shuttles were landing near the colony's outer perimeter. The aliens were preparing for something. Tony Clark ran up to Jake. "Commander, we're receiving another transmission." They hurried back to the communications room. The harsh voice of Warcast Thekmore filled the speakers. "Human Commander, you have been slow to respond. To encourage faster decision-making, I will demonstrate HFY efficiency." Through the colony's external cameras, they watched as alien soldiers dragged 3 human prisoners into view. Jake recognized them as scouts who had been captured 2 weeks earlier. "You have until sunrise to accept surrender terms. For each hour you delay, 1 prisoner dies. This is not negotiation. This is fact." The transmission ended. On the screen, they watched as one of the prisoners was forced to his knees. The alien executioner raised a blade. Jake turned away, but he could not block out the sounds that followed. "Monster," Lisa whispered. Outside, 2 more prisoners waited their turn. The aliens had made their message clear: accept surrender or watch more people die. Jake looked at the clock on the wall. 8 hours until sunrise. 8 hours to decide the fate of 8,000 people. In the distance, they could hear families crying, the sound of children asking questions, the quiet prayers of those who still had faith. Tomorrow would bring either salvation or destruction. But tonight, New Haven Colony prepared for what might be their final hours as free humans. The aliens had given them a choice that was no choice at all. Surrender and live as slaves, or fight and die as heroes. Either way, Jake Morrison knew that. The New Haven Colony they had built and loved was already dead. Dawn came too quickly. Commander Jake Morrison stood in the command center staring at the communications equipment. In 15 minutes, he would have to give the aliens his answer. The vote had been close. Very close. 52% wanted to surrender. 48% wanted to fight. The colony was ready to split apart. Families had argued through the night. Friends had become enemies. Parents had made impossible choices about their children's futures. "Commander," Lisa Carter said quietly. "It's time." Jake nodded. He reached for the microphone, then stopped. The emergency sensors were beeping. Tony Clark was hunched over his equipment, adjusting controls with shaking hands. "Sir, I'm getting readings I don't understand," Tony called out. "Multiple contacts approaching from deep space. The signatures are huge." "HFY reinforcements?" Jake asked. "No, sir. These readings are different. Very different." Tony pressed his headphones against his ears. Sir, these aren't Vex-High ships. Jake hurried to the sensor station. The screen showed blips moving toward their system at incredible speed. Whatever they were coming fast. Can you identify them? Jake asked. Negative, sir. The computer doesn't recognize the signatures, but sir... Tony looked up with wide eyes. These ships are massive, much bigger than the Vex-High fleet. Through the colony's external cameras, they could see the alien warships hovering overhead. The Vex-High had noticed the approaching contacts too. Their ships were moving into defensive positions. Warcast. Techmore's voice crackled over the communication system. Human Commander, your time is finished. Give me your answer now. Jake looked at the sensor screen. The unknown contacts were still hours away. Whatever they were, they wouldn't arrive in time to save the colony. This is Commander Morrison, Jake said into the microphone. We need more time to consider your terms. The alien's laughter was harsh and cold. Time is finished. You will surrender now, or I will begin the destruction of your colony. On the screens, they watched as the Vex-High ships powered up their main weapons. Energy readings spiked as the aliens prepared to bombard the colony. Sir, Tony called out urgently. The unknown contacts just accelerated. They're moving faster than anything I've ever seen. Jake looked at the sensors again. The approaching ships had somehow doubled their speed. At this rate, they would reach the system within the hour, but an hour was too long. The Vex-High weapons were charging. In minutes, the colony would be under direct attack. All hands prepare for bombardment, Jake announced over the colony intercom. Take shelter in the emergency bunkers. This is not a drill. Across the colony, families ran for the underground shelters. Parents carried crying children. The elderly were helped by younger colonists. Everyone moved as fast as they could. The Deus. First energy blast hit the colony's outer wall. The impact shook the entire structure. Emergency lights flickered on as the main power grid fluctuated. Through the windows, they could see fires starting in the damaged sections. Shield generators are failing, Pete Davis reported from the engineering station. We won't survive a sustained bombardment. Another blast hit the colony. This one struck closer to the residential areas. Jake could hear screaming through the intercom system. People were trapped in the damaged sections. Warcast Techmore spoke. Again. This is what happens to humans who refuse to surrender. Your deaths will serve as examples to other colonies. The Vex-High ships moved closer, preparing for a final devastating attack. Their weapons glowed with deadly energy. Jake realized that in moments everyone he had sworn to protect would be dead. Then Tony screamed, Sir, the contacts just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Jake spun to look at the sensors. The screen was filled with new contacts. Ships unlike anything in their databases had appeared as if from nowhere. The readings were massive. Through the external cameras, they could see the Vex-High fleet suddenly turning away from the colony. The aliens had detected the new arrivals and were moving to intercept them. What are they? Lisa asked, staring at the sensor readings. I don't know, Jake replied, but they're not Vex-High. The communication system crackled with a new voice. This one spoke clear English with no alien accent. Vex-High fleet, this is Admiral Kate Sullivan of the 7th Expeditionary Force. You will cease your attack on the human colony immediately and prepare to be destroyed. Jake felt his heart stop. Human ships. A human fleet had arrived. Warcast Techmore's voice was filled with rage. What humans dare to challenge the Vex-High Empire? You are few. We are many. You will join these colonists in death. Negative, Admiral Sullivan replied calmly. You will surrender or be destroyed. You have 30 seconds to decide. Through the cameras, they could see the space battle beginning. The Vex-High fleet was huge. Over 40 warships surrounded the unknown human vessels. But something was wrong. With the visual displays, the human ships seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Tony, are the cameras malfunctioning? Jake asked. No, sir. The ships are actually doing that. They're appearing and disappearing from sensors, too. I can't get a solid lock on them. The first exchange of weapons fire lit up the space around the colony. Vex-High energy blasts streaked. toward the human ships, but most of them seemed to pass right through empty space. The human vessels were there one moment and gone the next. Then the human ships returned fire. Jake had never seen weapons like these. Beams of energy that seemed to bend reality itself reached out and touched the Vex-High ships. When they hit, the alien vessels simply came apart. Not exploded, not destroyed. They just stopped existing. "What kind of weapons are those?" Lisa whispered. On the communication system, they could hear panicked Vex-High voices. The aliens were shouting orders and warnings in their own language. Their confident attack was turning into chaos. Warcast Techmore tried to regain control. "All ships focus fire on the largest human vessel. Destroy their flagship." The Vex-High fleet concentrated their attack on one of the mysterious human ships. Dozens of energy blasts converged on the target. But when the light faded, the human ship was undamaged. It hadn't even moved. Admiral Sullivan's voice came through the communications again. "Vex-High Commander, your weapons are ineffective. This is your final warning. Surrender or be destroyed." "Never," Techmore screamed. "The Vex-High do not surrender to inferior humans." The human fleet's response was swift and terrible. All of their ships fired at once. The weapons reached across space and touched every Vex-High vessel simultaneously. One by one, the alien ships began to break apart. Jake watched in amazement as the fleet that had terrorized his colony for months was systematically destroyed. The aliens' superior numbers meant nothing. Their powerful weapons couldn't touch the human ships. In minutes, over half the Vex-High fleet was gone. "Tony, are you picking up any communications from the human fleet?" Jake asked. "Yes, sir. They're using old military codes. Very old. Some of these encryption patterns are from 30 years ago." Tony adjusted his equipment. "Sir, they're asking for colony status reports. They want to know how many survivors we have." Jake grabbed the microphone. "This is Commander Morrison of New Haven Colony. We have approximately 8,000 civilians. We need immediate medical assistance and supplies." Admiral Sullivan's voice responded immediately. "Understood, Commander. Medical teams are being prepared. Hold your position. The remaining Vex-High ships are attempting to retreat." Through the cameras, they could see the surviving alien vessels trying to escape, but the human ships moved to intercept them. The mysterious vessels appeared in front of the fleeing aliens, cutting off their escape routes. Warcast. Techmore made one final desperate transmission. "You have not seen the last of the Vex-High Empire. We will return with 1,000 ships. We will burn every human world." Admiral Sullivan's reply was cold and final. "No, you won't." The last Vex-High ship disappeared in a flash of light. The space around New Haven Colony was suddenly quiet. The siege was over. Jake slumped into his chair. After 3 months of terror, it was finished. His people were safe, but he had so many questions. Who were these humans with their impossible ships? Where had they come from? How had they found New Haven? "Commander Morrison," Admiral Sullivan's voice came through the speakers. "This is Admiral Sullivan. We're sending shuttles down to your colony. Our medical teams will begin treating your wounded immediately. You and your people are safe now." Jake looked around the command center. His officers were staring at the sensors in disbelief. Outside, he could hear colonists cheering. Children were laughing. After months of despair, hope had returned to New Haven. But Jake knew this was just the beginning. Whoever these mysterious humans were, they had just changed everything. The galaxy would never be the same. As the first human shuttles appeared in the sky above the colony, Jake Morrison wondered what other surprises humanity had been hiding in the darkness between the stars. The first shuttle landed in the colony's main courtyard 2 hours after the space battle ended. Commander Jake Morrison watched through the command center windows as the craft touched down. It was unlike any human ship he had ever seen. The hull was smooth and dark, with no visible weapons or markings. The shuttle door opened with a soft hiss. 6 figures in advanced armor stepped out. Their equipment was sleek and powerful, unlike anything in the colonial defense forces. The Lead figure removed her helmet, revealing a woman with short gray hair and sharp blue eyes. That must be Admiral Sullivan, Lisa Carter said, standing beside Jake at the window. Jake nodded. Let's go meet our rescuers. They made their way through the damaged corridors of the colony. Emergency crews were already working to repair the worst damage from the bombardment. Colonists watched from doorways and windows as Jake and his officers headed toward the courtyard. Admiral Kate Sullivan was examining the damage to the colony walls when Jake approached. She turned as he drew near, and Jake saw the kind of confidence that came from years of command in dangerous situations. Commander Morrison, Admiral Sullivan said, extending her hand. I'm Admiral Kate Sullivan, 7th Expeditionary Force. Sorry we couldn't get here sooner. Jake shook her hand. Admiral, I'm grateful you arrived at all. We thought we were going to die today. You almost did, Sullivan replied grimly. The Vexhai don't usually leave survivors. You're lucky we were in the area. In the area? Jake asked. Admiral, where exactly did you come from? I've never heard of the 7th Expeditionary Force. Sullivan smiled, but it wasn't a warm expression. Most people haven't. We operate outside normal fleet command, have been for over 30 years. Behind Sullivan, her Marines were setting up equipment in the courtyard. Medical teams in advanced gear were already moving toward the colony's hospital. Jake noticed that all of their technology looked decades ahead of anything he had seen. Admiral, how is this possible? Lisa asked. The weapons your ships used, the armor your people wear, this technology doesn't exist. It does now, Sullivan replied. Commander, is there somewhere private we can talk? I need to brief you on the situation. Jake led the Admiral and her staff to the colony's conference room. Dr. Amy Roberts joined them, along with Pete Davis and Helen Brooks. Sullivan's second-in-command, a tall man she introduced as Captain Ross Mitchell, took a seat across from the colonial leadership. First things first, Sullivan said. How many casualties did you take during the siege? Dr. Roberts answered. 43 dead, most from starvation, disease, and lack of medical supplies. Another 60 are in critical condition. Sullivan nodded to one of her officers. Get our medical team set up immediately. Full treatment protocols. Save everyone you can. Admiral, Jake said, I need to understand what just happened out there. Your ships destroyed a Vexhai fleet like it was nothing. How? Sullivan leaned back in her chair. Commander, what do you know about humanity's first contact with alien species? The basics. First contact was about 50 years ago with the Althari, traders. We've had peaceful relations with most species since then. Peaceful, Sullivan repeated with a bitter laugh. That's what the core worlds wanted to believe. But while Earth was playing diplomat, human colonies were being attacked, enslaved, destroyed. Captain Mitchell spoke up. The Vexhai alone have wiped out over a dozen human settlements in the past 20 years. The core worlds called them isolated incidents or pirate attacks, Sullivan continued. 35 years ago, a group of military officers decided that humanity needed a different approach. We couldn't rely on diplomacy with species that only understood force. You went rogue, Lisa said. We went necessary, Sullivan corrected. The 7th Expeditionary Force was created to develop responses to alien threats, real responses. We've been operating in deep space ever since, studying enemy tactics and developing countermeasures. Jake looked around the table. That's how you knew about the attack on New Haven. We've been tracking Vexhai expansion for years. We knew they would eventually target this system. So we waited. You waited? Dr. Roberts asked angrily. You could have prevented this siege? Those people died for nothing? Sullivan's expression hardened. Doctor, those people died because the Vexhai are monsters who need to be stopped. Their deaths weren't meaningless if they help us end this threat permanently. What do you mean, end the threat? Jake asked. Captain Mitchell activated a holographic display on the table. It showed a star map with dozens of systems marked in red. These are Vexhai worlds, Mitchell explained. Military bases, colony worlds, shipyards. For 30 years we've been mapping their entire empire. Sullivan stood up and pointed to various systems on the map. The attack on New Haven was a test. We wanted to see how our new weapons performed against a full HFY fleet. The results exceeded expectations. Jake stared at the map. You're planning to attack all of these worlds? Not just attack, Sullivan said. Destroy. The HFY Empire will cease to exist within 6 months. The room fell silent. Jake looked at his officers, seeing his own shock reflected in their faces. Admiral, that's genocide, Dr. Roberts said quietly. No, Doctor. Genocide is what the HFY do to human colonies. What we're planning is justice. Sullivan's voice was cold. The HFY have shown us what they are. Now we're going to show them what we are. Helen Brooks spoke for the first time. How many people are in the 7th Expeditionary Force? Classified, Sullivan replied. But I can tell you we have sufficient resources to complete the mission. Jake stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the Admiral's medical teams working with Dr. Roberts' staff. Colonial children who had been dying hours earlier were already looking healthier. The advanced medical technology was performing miracles. Commander, Sullivan said, I know this is a lot to process, but I need you to understand something. The galaxy is not a peaceful place. There are species out there that see humans as prey. The only way to survive is to be stronger than they are. Stronger or more ruthless? Jake asked without turning around. Sometimes there's no difference. Sullivan joined him at the window. Look at your people, Commander. Look at what 3 months of siege did to them. Now imagine that happening to every human colony in this sector. Jake watched as a young mother hugged her son. The boy had been close to death that morning. Now he was laughing and playing with other children. The Admiral's medical teams had saved him. The HFY will not stop with New Haven, Sullivan continued. They'll attack other colonies, other families, other children unless we stop them first. Captain Mitchell stood up from the table. Commander, we're offering your people a choice. You can return to your lives here and pretend this never happened. Or you can join us. Join you how? Lisa asked. Your colony fought for 3 months, against impossible odds. Your people showed courage under fire. We can use that kind of determination. Mitchell gestured toward the map. We need good officers for the campaign ahead. Jake turned back to the table. What exactly are you asking us to do? Sullivan smiled, and this time it was genuine. Help us end this war before it destroys more human worlds. Help us make sure that no human colony ever faces what New Haven faced. Through the window, Jake could see more shuttles landing. Marines, in advanced armor, were unloading supplies and equipment. These weren't just rescue teams. They were an invasion force preparing for war. Admiral, if we join you, what happens to the colony? The colony will be protected. We'll leave a garrison here and upgrade your defenses. New Haven will become a forward base for operations in this sector. Dr. Roberts stood up. I want to see your medical facilities. If your technology can save lives, I want to learn how to use it. Sullivan nodded. Captain Mitchell will arrange a tour of our medical bay. Pete Davis looked up from the holographic map. Admiral, that power source in your ships, it's not fusion, is it? No, it's not. Interested in learning about it? Pete grinned for the first time in months. Very interested. Jake looked around the room. His officers were already being recruited. The promise of advanced technology and the chance to prevent future attacks were powerful incentives. Admiral, I have one question. If we join you, are we still fighting for humanity? Or are we becoming something else? Sullivan was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice soft but firm. Commander, we're fighting to make sure humanity survives. Whatever we have to become to do that, we'll become. The question is whether you're willing to do the same. Outside, the sounds of reconstruction continued. New Haven was being rebuilt, stronger than before. But Jake knew that the colony's innocent days were over. They had seen what was waiting in the darkness between the stars. The choice Admiral Sullivan offered was simple. Join the fight, or wait for the next attack. Looking at his officers, Jake Morrison realized there was only one answer he could give. 3 weeks after the battle, New Haven Colony looked like a different place. Advanced medical equipment hummed in the hospital, where Dr. Amy Roberts worked alongside 7th Expeditionary Force medics. The damaged walls had been repaired with materials stronger than the original construction. New power generators provided more energy than the colony had ever had before. Commander Jake Morrison stood in his rebuilt office, watching the construction crews install new defensive systems. Outside his window, he could see children playing in the courtyard. The same children who had been starving just weeks earlier were now healthy and laughing. "Sir," Lieutenant Lisa Carter entered the office. She wore a new uniform with the insignia of the 7th Expeditionary Force. "Admiral Sullivan wants to see you in the conference room." Jake nodded and followed Lisa through the corridors. The colony felt different now, not just because of the repairs, but because of the people. Many of the colonists moved with new purpose. They had seen what was possible when humanity stopped playing by peaceful rules. Admiral Sullivan was studying reports when Jake entered the conference room. Captain Ross Mitchell sat beside her, along with several other officers Jake didn't recognize. Dr. Frank Rogers, the 7th Expeditionary Force Chief Medical Officer, was also present. "Commander," Sullivan said as Jake took his seat, "we've received confirmation from other sectors. The first phase of Operation Homecoming is complete." Sullivan activated the holographic display. The star map showed dozens of systems, but now, many of the red markers had changed to blue. 17 Vex-High military bases have been neutralized, Captain Mitchell reported. Their 3rd and 5th fleets no longer exist. We estimate their total military capacity has been reduced by 60%. Jake looked at the map in amazement. "In 3 weeks?" "The Vex-High built their empire by attacking weak targets," Sullivan explained. "They never prepared for a coordinated assault by an equally advanced force. Their defenses were designed to stop primitive weapons, not our technology." Dr. Rogers leaned forward. "The best part is that we're rescuing human prisoners from every base we hit. Over 4,000 so far. People who were captured years ago and given up for dead." "What about civilian populations?" Jake asked. "The Vex-High have families too." Sullivan's expression didn't change. "Vex-High civilians are evacuated before we attack military targets. We're not interested in slaughtering innocents. But their military infrastructure is being completely destroyed." "And the Vex-High response?" Lisa asked. Captain Mitchell smiled grimly. "Panic. Their emperor has recalled all fleets to defend the homeworlds. They're abandoning their expansion plans to protect what's left of their empire." Sullivan stood up and pointed to a cluster of systems at the center of the map. "Which brings us to the final phase. The Vex-High core worlds. Their capital, their shipyards, their command centers." Jake studied the display. "Those systems will be heavily defended." "Yes, they will. Which is why we need every experienced officer we can get." Sullivan looked directly at Jake. "Commander, I'm offering you command of a strike force, your own ships, your own crew, your own mission." "What kind of mission?" "The Vex-High have a prison world called Kethvara. It holds over 10,000 human captives, including civilians from colonies that were destroyed years ago. We need someone to liberate that world while the main fleet attacks the capital." Jake looked around the table. "Why me?" "Because you held this colony together for 3 months against impossible odds. Because your people trust you. And because you understand what it means to protect human lives." Sullivan's voice was serious. "This mission will be dangerous. The prison world is heavily guarded. But those people deserve to come home." Jake thought about the children in the courtyard outside. 3 weeks ago they had been dying. Now they were alive because someone had decided to fight for them. "What about New Haven?" Jake asked. Captain Mitchell answered. "The colony will be fully protected. We're leaving a garrison and upgrading all defensive systems. New Haven will become a regional command center for this sector." "And my people? The ones who want to stay?" "They stay," Sullivan said simply. "No one is forced to join us, but everyone who wants to fight for humanity will have that chance." Jake stood up and walked to the window. Below, he could see Helen Brooks organizing civilian volunteers. Pete Davis was working with Expeditionary Force engineers on new power systems. Dr. Roberts was training colonial medics on advanced medical equipment. His people had found new purpose. They were no longer just trying to survive. They were helping to build something bigger. "Commander," a new voice said. Jake turned to see Tony Clark entering the room. "Sorry to interrupt, but we're receiving transmissions from across human space." Sullivan nodded. "Put it on the speakers." The room filled with voices. Human voices from dozens of star systems. "This is New Tokyo Colony. The Vex-High fleet that was threatening us just retreated. We're safe. Meridian Station reporting. Alien raiders in this sector are fleeing toward their home systems. Phoenix Colony here. We just received word that our captured citizens are being rescued. Thank you, whoever you are." Sullivan turned off the speakers. "Word is spreading. Other human worlds are learning that they don't have to be afraid anymore." Jake looked at the Admiral. "How long have you been planning this?" 35 years, Sullivan replied. "Every day we've been preparing for the moment when humanity would stop accepting alien aggression and start responding to it. And after the Vex-High, what happens then?" Sullivan was quiet for a moment. "There are other threats out there, Commander. Species that see humans as prey. Pirates, slavers, empire builders. As long as they exist, the 7th Expeditionary Force will exist to stop them." Dr. Rogers spoke up. "Commander, I've been working with Dr. Roberts. The medical advances we've shared will revolutionize healthcare on human worlds. But we need people who understand both the technology and the mission to spread that knowledge." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that joining us isn't just about fighting wars. It's about advancing human civilization, making sure that what happened to New Haven never happens again." Jake walked back to the table and looked at the star map. Blue lights were spreading across the galaxy. Human worlds that were no longer afraid. Colonies that could defend themselves. Families that could sleep peacefully at night. "Admiral, if I take this mission, if I help rescue those prisoners, what happens afterward?" "That's up to you," Sullivan said. "You can return to New Haven and live peacefully, or you can stay with the fleet and help us build a better galaxy for humanity." Jake thought about the 10,000 human prisoners waiting on Kethavara. People who had given up hope of ever seeing home again. Families torn apart by alien cruelty. Children who had grown up in captivity. "Lisa," Jake said to his tactical officer, "are you interested in commanding a rescue mission?" Lisa smiled. "Yes, sir, absolutely." Jake turned to Sullivan. "Admiral, I accept your offer. But I have conditions." "Name them." "First, any of my people who want to join us can come. Second, we do this mission right. We save everyone we can and we don't leave anyone behind. Third, after we're done, some of us come back to New Haven. This colony needs people who understand both worlds." Sullivan extended her hand. "Agreed, Commander. Welcome to the 7th Expeditionary Force." As they shook hands, Jake felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope for the future. Not just survival, but the chance to build something better. "When do we leave?" Jake asked. "Tomorrow," Captain Mitchell replied. "Your ship is being prepared now. The HSS Liberation, she's fast, well-armed, and equipped with our latest technology." That evening, Jake walked through New Haven one last time as its commander. The colony was peaceful. Families were having dinner together. Children were playing games. The elderly were telling stories of better times. But now, there really would be better times. Humanity had shown that it could defend itself, that it could strike back against those who threatened innocent people, that it would not accept being prey for alien empires. Dr. Roberts found him in the courtyard. "Jake, I wanted to thank you for everything you did during the siege, for the choices you made. We all made hard choices, Amy, but they led us here. Are you sure about this mission? It's going to be dangerous." Jake looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, 10,000 humans were waiting for rescue. Somewhere else, other human colonies were threatened by other aliens who thought humanity was weak. "I'm sure," Jake said. "It's time to show the galaxy what humans really are." The next morning, Jake Morrison left New Haven Colony aboard the HSS Liberation. But he didn't leave alone. Lisa Carter, Pete Davis, Tony Clark, and 50 other colonists joined him. They were no longer just survivors. They were part of humanity's answer to the darkness between the stars. As the ship jumped to hyperspace, Jake received a final transmission from Admiral Sullivan. All human worlds. This is Admiral Kate Sullivan of the 7th Expeditionary Force. We are coming home. We are bringing our people back. And we are bringing justice with us. No human world stands alone. No human life is expendable. This is our promise to humanity, and our warning to any who would harm our people. Jake smiled as he listened to the message. After years of fear and uncertainty, humanity had finally found its voice, and the galaxy would never be the same.